Here's another way that we can think about interval inversions. Suppose I have two notes, and let's actually pick two notes. Let's say we have a B and an E, and we want to play this B and the E simultaneously. There are two ways that we can order the B and the E. We could put the B on top and the E on the bottom, like this. Or we could flip them and put the E on top and the B on the bottom, like this. Here's what the first way sounds like with the B on top. Here's what the second way sounds like with the E on top. And there's actually another way that we can easily put the E on top, or put it in the order of E on top, B on the bottom, and that is if we go down the octave to this E and this B. And that's another way of thinking about interval inversions. We're simply taking two notes and recognizing that there are two different ways that we can order them. We can put one of those notes on the top and one on the bottom, or we can flip the order and put the one that was on the bottom on the top and the one that was on the top on the bottom. There is a pattern to the way that intervals invert that we're going to discover. And I'd like to actually sort of work that pattern out a little bit. I think it's worth it to do that. So let's start with the interval, with the smallest interval, almost the smallest interval of the second. And I'll start on C just for convenience, but this will work starting on any note. If we have two notes, C and D, we can order those notes in a different way. We can put not the C on top and not the D on top and the C on the bottom. We can put the C on top and the D on the bottom. So the interval of a second inverts to the interval of a seventh. Let's go to the interval of a third. Let's have a third of C and E. We have two notes, C and E. In the interval of a third, the E is on the top and the C is on the bottom, but if we flip them and put the C on the top and the E on the bottom, they become a sixth. A fourth, let's have the fourth from C to F. If we exchange the order of those two notes, the C will go on top and the F will go on the bottom. That becomes a fifth. And a fifth, I'll put bar lines here just so we don't get mixed up between these. A fifth, let's say C to G, if we flip the order of the C and the G, that becomes a fourth. And if we continue on, and I'll keep going down here, the next interval we would have is the interval of a sixth. And so that would be C going up to A, the interval of a sixth. If we flip the order of those two notes, put the C on top, C to A becomes a third. Isn't that interesting, by the way? Notice the fourth inverts to the fifth, and the fifth inverts to the fourth. The sixth inverts to the third, and the third inverts to the sixth. Our next interval is the seventh. So let's do a seventh from C to B. And if we flip the order of this, then we have the C on top and the B on the bottom. The seventh inverts to the second, and remember back here, the second inverted to the third. So we have this sort of this kind of symmetry that's working out. The second inverts to the seventh, and the seventh inverts to the second. The third inverts to the sixth, and the sixth inverts to the third. the fourth inverts to the fifth, and the fifth inverts to the fourth. Notice again the one interval I didn't actually talk about, or the two intervals I didn't actually talk about, were the unison and the octave, because those work in a way that's a little bit not always completely intuitive. So I just want to mention those for a moment. So let me write another treble clef up here. There we go. Not the world's greatest treble clef, but the unison, and since we can't write two note heads right on top of one another, we write them just side by side like this. The unison, by definition, inverts to the octave, and the octave inverts to the unison. That isn't necessarily the way that we would intuitively think about it, but that's just sort of the convention that we use. So if we put this all together, and this is going to be one of the more mathematical things we look at this semester. Let me get some blank space here. Let's just make a little chart. So the unison inverts to the octave. The second inverts to the seventh. The third inverts to the sixth. The fourth inverts to the fifth. The fifth, start back up here, the fifth inverts to the fourth. The sixth inverts to the third, and the second inverts to the seventh inverts to the second, and the octave inverts to the unison. So we have this kind of symmetry that happens between the octave and the unison, the second and the seventh, the fourth and the fifth, and the third and the sixth. And notice, by the way, the intervals that are, remember we talked about the perfect consonances, the imperfect consonances, and the dissonances. The perfect consonances, like the octave, invert to the perfect consonances. The imperfect consonances, like the third and the sixth, invert to the other imperfect consonances. The dissonances, the seconds, invert to the sevenths, which is also a dissonance, and the sevenths invert to the seconds. The only place where that breaks down a little bit is the fourth to the fifth and the fifth to the fourth, because we know that the fourth sometimes can be a consonant and sometimes can be a dissonance. This feels like it's going to be one of the most abstract and mathematical things that we look at this semester. But this is actually going to be a really practical thing when we start looking at harmony, when we start looking at triads, at chords, and also extending beyond this semester when you start getting into harmony and counterpoint, the idea of interval inversions and what happens to an interval when you invert them. That is going to be crucial, particularly in counterpoint. So as abstract and mathematical as this may seem, this is actually going to have really practical implications down the line.